Okay, so good morning students, we'll start the class. So yesterday what we were discussing was, we were talking about the first chapter and some of the portion that we have completed. What we have discussed, we have talked about a topic called as biodiversity. What are the points that you have to study from biodiversity? We have marked it down, right? Together with that, we have started with 3 words that is called as classification, taxonomy and systematics, right? We have completed classification and taxonomy. And what do you remember? If you are talking about classification, what is classification? Nothing but arrangement. Arrangement of organisms into what? Into certain groups and subgroups, right? Next, we have what? We will be talking about, we have talked about taxonomy also. Taxonomy is nothing but a branch of science that talks about the fact that how will you arrange, right? So if you want to go for an arrangement of organisms or you want to classify, why do you classify? To know the organism better, right? So taxonomy, we have talked about the 2 types of taxonomy, right? What were the 2 types? Classical taxonomy and modern, right? When we talk about classical, what is the word that we remember? That it is based purely on morphology. It is just one character based on which the classification has been done, right? And if you are talking about modern, we consider almost all the characteristics. And if you are talking about all the characteristics, which characteristics? We'll be talking about morphology, or what is considered morphology, anatomy, cytology, right? Physiology, and together with that, we also consider ecology. The ecological role is something that we have understood, right? Either it would be a producer, it would be a consumer, or it would be a decomposer. We'll be talking about the next word, that is systematics. Heading koriba, systematics. Okay. We'll write the definition first. However, the definition is not important. I think we'll know, right? Okay, first write it down. Over. Okay, so we are talking about systematics. Last class when we have talked about taxonomy, this is a portion that we have already studied, right? Remember we have talked about something called as elements of taxonomy, right? How many elements we have seen? That there are 4 elements in case of taxonomy. Now comparing it with systematics, the first point is whenever we are talking about classification, either we can go for a taxonomic classification or we can go for a systematic classification, right? You can classify taxonomically or you can classify systematically. So whenever you are talking about classification, either it could be taxonomically done or it could be systematically done. If you are talking about taxonomic type of classification, what are the points that you are going to include? You are going to include morphology, anatomy, physiology, yes, cytology, right, chemical nature of the cell, etc., and also ecology. Now what is the difference? In this case also, if you are going to classify systematically, then what are the points that you are going to consider? You are going to consider morphology, anatomy, physiology, cytology, ecology, and together with that we have a new word that is called as affinity. This time you are going to consider the evolution of the organism, right? So any type of a classification, if it is done taking into consideration the evolution point, that type of a classification would be called as systematic classification. What is taxonomy? You consider all these points except evolution. So systematics could also be defined as, what is systematics? It is taxonomy without evolution. Instead of using the word evolution, we have a better word. We'll be writing about this point little later, right? We'll come across a word called as phylogeny. And what is phylogeny? Nothing but evolution. So when you are classifying an organism, if you are considering all these points together with that, you are considering the phylogeny of the organism or the evolution of the organism, that type of a classification would be called as systematic classification. Without phylogeny, it would be called as taxonomic classification. I think it's clear now, right? As far as characteristics is concerned, in case of taxonomy, how many characteristics do we have? We have 4 characteristics, right? In this case, we have 5 characteristics. So the chart is not complete. We are comparing systematics and taxonomy. The first point is the elements of taxonomy, the elements of systematics. The next point. Understood? Right? So what are the points that are important? Characteristics of taxonomy, characteristics of systematics. Next, unit of taxonomy is species and unit of this one is systematics is population. Why population? Because you have to talk about evolution, and when you talk about evolution, you consider a lot of organisms together, right? Next, the term was given by, this is a question that is asked, the term systematics was given by, we have written a sentence prior to this. The word systematics is derived from, right? It is derived from systema, and the term is given by Linnaeus, right? Next is, as far as different types of taxonomy is concerned, yesterday we have talked about two types of taxonomy, that is classical and modern. However, as I said, these are not only the two types of taxonomy, or this is a classification, right? We have different types of classification given by different scientists. So taxonomy has again been divided into or classified into alpha, beta and omega taxonomy. This is something that we are going to study in Plant Kingdom. Right? As far as this is concerned, again, we have not written that point, we'll be writing it now. Systematics could again be divided into two types, either it's a classical systematics or it's a new systematics. Let's write that point. I think up till here it's clear, right? Okay, types of taxonomy we have discussed, and at that time we have talked about classical taxonomy. We come across this word again. This time classical systematics, and whenever we hear the word classical, what do we remember? First, it is primitive. Second, it is based only on morphology, right? And when we write all characters, we understand morphology, anatomy, cytology, everything together with what? Together with phylogeny. And what is phylogeny? The evolutionary history of an organism is called as phylogeny. We come across two words, one is called as ontogeny and the other is called as phylogeny. The life history is called as ontogeny, the evolutionary history is called as phylogeny, right? So this is all about systematics. So the first part of the lesson was biodiversity, second was the three words, classification, taxonomy and systematics. What next? We have to talk about something called as nomenclature. Before going to nomenclature, some of the points that we will be writing. So we come across three types of classification: artificial classification, natural and phylogenetic classification. Whenever we talk about class artificial, it is synonymous to key, classical. Yes or no? We can talk about it as classical also, but we don't use the word classical classification. Instead, we use the word called as artificial. So prior to this point, or prior to this point, all the classification that were done by previous, ancient scientists and workers, that type of a classification was called as artificial. First point. Second, if it has to be artificial, the only thing that was considered was only morphology, right? In this case, all characters, I don't think we have to write it again. All characters except phylogeny was considered, means morphology, anatomy, cytology, physiology, everything. And in this case, we have not written that line, however, we understand, right? Phylogenetic, as the name suggests, is it only phylogeny that is considered, or it's all the characters? All the characters together with phylogeny. I think it's understood. And as far as this classification is concerned, which one is considered as most advanced? Phylogenetic, right? Second point. Second point, likha, father of taxonomy. Founder of taxonomy. Yeah, yeah. Okay, do one thing. Instead of giving father, I think this is a word that we need to change. Here you write founder. Okay? Founder of taxonomy, or father of biology, or father of zoology is Aristotle. And father of taxonomy. Over? Write it down. Bitupon. Okay. Online on Jun Bitupon asa, Pujat ki problem paisa, Okoman? Kunkini part Buzana Akman Likidiason? Ma explain Kwedi Mako. Just topic to Heri to Lika. Kunkini pra buza nai, mo ako ebar explain kori dim, khali you just write. From this point to this point, I did not understand. Please write it down. Bitupon, can you hear me? Huna paisa ne? Bitupon, are you in the class? Just write yes, ma'am. Please respond. If you don't respond, I will not understand. Tumi buzi paisa na mo gom napam. You wanted the explanation in SMS? Bujai disu. Ba bujai dim kunkhini portion buzi poa na hetu kwa. Khali topic ro naam to likha. Okay. I think it's over. Right? Okay, while I'm explaining, I have to speak Asmis also because there are certain online students, right? So the explanation again will be in English and in Asmis. Okay, so we'll be talking about what? Nomenclature. I mean, etyalake ki porilu systematics aru taxonomy porilu. Systematics aru taxonomy difference ki asile je etat evolution consider kora hoy aru etat evolution consider kora nohoy. Jedi sob bila characters tar logote jedi evolution no consider koru titehale tak ami ki buli kom taxonomy classification buli kom. Ar jedi sob characteristics or logot the evolution consider koru tak ami ki buli kom systematic classification koru ar jedi evolution consider no koru titehale tak ami ki buli kom taxonomy classification buli kom. After that he duta pointer pisot we need to talk about nomenclature. When we talk about nomenclature mane ki naming an organism is called as nomenclature, right? Kali ami already we have talked about nomenclature a little bit. What did we say? We said that there are two ways of writing a name. Either it would be a vernacular name or it would be a scientific name, right? So naam likhude ki hobo pare je vernacular name mane local name aru eta ki hobo pare je scientific name hobo pare, right? So these are the points that we'll be writing. So vernacular names are scientific names, vernacular names bilak change hoy thake, eta jagat beleg naam dibo pari aru hitu jagat beleg naam dibo pari. But if you are talking about scientific name, scientific name is universally accepted. Tamane sobote eketa nami dibo pari. That is what is called as universally accepted. When we are talking about scientific name, the next point, it could be so ekhini part of scientific name to ki hoy sobote accept kore, it's universally accepted, and it is not like this okol binomial nomenclature to have scientific name, right? Procedure of giving a scientific name, eta scientific name dibo lagile, it could be polynomial, it could be trinomial, it could be binomial. Talking about the word polynomial, tamane ki, what we understand by the word polynomial, je eta namor bahut parts thakibo, right? We know that nowadays, if you are, suppose I am talking about this example, right? Mangifera indica ki hoy, mango, right? A mango to keta part ase, eta part or duta part, right? Nam keta ase, duta part. Since if there are two parts, that would be called as ki, binomial nomenclature. But whenever we are talking about scientific process of naming, it is not only binomial nomenclature that is present, but polynomial and trinomial has also been observed, right? Talking about the word polynomial, what we understand, je eta namot keta part thakibo, many parts thakibo, right? Etu jeneke nam eta duta part ase. In this case, what we will see is the name consisting of many parts. However, that is not, it's not convenient, right? Eta namor bahut parts sakile, it's very hard to use, right? So that's the reason why this is not accepted and it's no longer been used. Coming to the word trinomial nomenclature, we need, I think, did we speak about trinomial nomenclature yesterday? No. Okay, we'll talk about that now. So out of this three, heading koriba trinomial. Yeah, it's of two types. The subspecies and the species name is the same, right? So we have certain names where species name and the subspecies name could be same. We have certain names of organisms where the generic name and the species name could also be the same. Right? Okay, we might give another example for it. I did not write it, however, it's not important. Yeah, it's the Indian crow. We have varieties of crow, right? The one that is found in India, the name of that crow is this one, right? We have another example saying gorilla, gorilla, gorilla. So where it's a scientific name of gorilla, I think we know what a gorilla is, where all the parts are the same. The genus name is also gorilla, the species name is also gorilla, and subspecies name is also gorilla, right? So we see such type of naming in organisms. From this part, what is important is, so আমি কি পঢ়ি আছো trinomial nomenclature এটা নামত কেইটা part থাকিব তিনটা part থাকিব first part genus name second part species name third part to কি কি হ'ব subspecies আৰু variety if it is animal we'll be writing about the subspecies if it is a plant তেতিয়াহ'লে তাত কি থাকিব variety থাকিব and out of the examples আমি যোনকেইটা examples দেখিছো ন I think you can see this. Wherever VAR is written, VAR short form of K, variety. So we understand that we are talking about the plant, right? So what is the question that is asked from this part? First, who has proposed it? So name of the scientist important. Second question, prothom ki question ahe je kune propose trinomial nomenclature kune propose korise Lamarck propose korise first question. Second question is trinomial nomenclature what is the third part? Namtur third part to ki. The third part of the name is subspecies for animals and varieties for plants. And apart from those 2 points, rest of the things you don't need to study. This is just for the sake to understand, right? Ekita iman besi important nohoy, you don't need to buy hard mukhosto koribo nalage, right? So আমি কি ডিসকাস কৰি আছো যে when we are talking about scientific name no scientific name যেতিয়া আমি লিখো অকল যে binomial আছে তেনেকুৱা নহয় polynomial থাকিব পাৰে trinomial থাকিব পাৰে which one do we accept the binomial nomenclature right so details about obviously binomial nomenclature we have to do so heading লিখা binomial nomenclature. আমি ইয়াৰ কথাখিনি জানুই তথাপি অকমান introduction we need to write. I think we know the points about binomial nomenclature. A name will have how many parts? 2 parts. What is the correct way of writing a name? I think you all have studied something called as rules for binomial nomenclature, right? So this is the part that we are going to discuss. So we have two informations in point number 1 and point number 2. So you need to read the question properly. Question 2 ki khudise proposed by khudise and established by khudise. Generally the question is asked on the second point, right? Binomial nomenclature is established by careless linears. Aru ekhini part to bujhiye paisu. Jikono eta namot keta part thakibo lage. Jikono eta namot duta part thakibo lage. Eta hol genus name aru eta hol species name. Species name tuk ami ki buli kobo paru? Specific epithet buli kobo paru. It's the same thing, right? Next point. So binomial nomenclature was established by careless linears is something that we have written. What is the point important in this point is nationality, right? Question has been asked about the nationality. Next, binomial nomenclature is explained by linears in a particular book. What is the name of the book? Systema Naturae. Systema Naturae has many editions, so you need to remember the edition also. Protection book or ki thake edition thake na, you have the first edition, you have the second edition, etc. So binomial nomenclature was accepted or it was declared in the 10th edition of Systema Naturae. And when we are talking about books bilakor publication dates are also present. So when we are talking about biology, especially when we are talking about this chapter and biological classification also, we come across two books. One is called as Systema Naturae and the other is called as Species Plantarum. Right? Binomial nomenclature talks about naming of an organism. Names of plants, it was related with a book called as Species Plantarum. Right? And names of animals is related with a book called as Systema Naturae. So we come across many books written by many scientists, but we need to talk about only two books and we have to remember the publication date also. Why do you have to remember the publication date? Because it is something related with rules of binomial nomenclature we'll be discussing later. As of now, keep for him, we know about a book that is called Systema Naturae. Which edition of Systema Naturae? 10th edition. What is the publication date? 1758. As I said, two books, Species Plantarum, Systema Naturae, two publication date, 1753, 1758, right? Okay, next point. So the second point talks about what? It talks about the generic name and species name. Since we are discussing biological nomenclature, eta namot keita part thake, duta part thake, eta hol species or name or eta hol genus or name. This point says that genus name to beleg organisms or karne, it could be the same provided some of the organisms are closely related. Not necessary at every time the genus name is the same. There are certain organisms that look almost similar, or they have characteristics that are similar, and in that case we can use the same generic name for different organisms. But however, species name to hodai ki hoy? Unique hoy. You cannot have two organisms with the same species name, but you can have two organisms or more than two organisms with the same genus name. I think it's understood, right? So genus name to beleg organisms or hobo pare, kintu species name to hodai eta organism or specific. Right? Next point. Yeah? बैक करना है हो गया So as I said, when we are talking about nomenclature, we come across two books. Right? And the two books, what you need to remember, what is the content of the book and what is the publication date. Right? So book konar bhitorot ki ase aru book kon publish ketia hoisile. So talking about species plantarum, it was published in 1753. What did it have? Names and descriptions of plants. As it is, if it is plantarum, we understand the plants are logote related book hoy. Right? And next we have another book that is called a Systema Naturae. Which edition of Systema Naturae? 10th edition of a Systema Naturae. We did not write it down, but however we know it. Right? So Systema Naturae ekhon book jot niki ki asile animals or description asile, species plantarum ki asile plants or description asile. As far as the number is concerned, the number is important. Right? So you need to know the number also. Again, what we have written, see, nomenclature was first started in, means since we are talking about nomenclature, all the names of the plants were included in the book called as Species Plantarum. All the names of the animals were given in the book called as Systema Naturae. Which one was first? Obviously the publication date, whatever is prior, right, as 1753. So nomenclature started with naming of the plants or naming of the animals. Naming of the plants. Is the point clear? So nomenclature khodai first use ketia hoisile plants hok naam kora prothomote arambho korisile. Then only after that ki hoisile se animals hok naam korisile. Right? So all the informations are important. Okay, next. So if you give a name, someone has to correct it, someone has to verify it also. So we are talking about certain international agencies like, I think you have heard something called as ICBN, ICZN and all those stuff, right? So when we are giving a name, it has to be standardized by certain agencies. And when we talk about agencies, so jikunu eral plantor naam dile, kune verify koribo ba kune accept kore ne nokore decide koribo ICBN, geological name ICJN, and rest of the thing, however, it's not very important. What is important is first and the second one, ICBN and ICJN. The full form is important. The date of the date of formation is also important. Right? 1961 and 1964. Rest of the thing, I don't think the question has been asked. Right. So I think the time is over. So for the next class, what you will write is rules for binomial nomenclature is the heading that you will write it down. Okay? In the meantime, just see whether you have any doubts. Online students, kiba doubts ase jodi khudha? Any point? Please type it down.